Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. For the headlines. Australia's second largest city begins a 6-week curfew, and the Philippine capital is ordered back into lockdown as the number of coronavirus cases recorded worldwide tops 18 million. The World Health Organization said that there might never be a silver bullet answer to the new coronavirus despite the rush to discover effective vaccines. America's first crewed spaceship to fly to the International Space Station in nearly a decade returned safely to Earth, splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico. And Microsoft announces it will continue talks to acquire the U.S. operations of popular video sharing app TikTok after meeting with President Trump, who seemingly backed off his earlier threats to ban the Chinese-owned platform.
We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options, but a lot of things are happening.
The World Health Organization said Monday that there might never be a silver bullet answer to the new coronavirus, despite the rush to discover effective vaccines. Let's listen in.
A number of vaccines are now in phase 3 clinical trials, and we all hope to have a number of effective vaccines that can help prevent people from infection. However, there is no silver bullet at the moment, and there might never be.
WHO Emergencies Head Dr. Mike Ryan exhorted all nations to rigorously enforce health measures such as mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing, and testing. Dr. Ryan said countries with high transmission rates, including Brazil and India, needed to brace for a big battle. The way out, he said, is long and requires a sustained commitment. The WHO official said an advanced investigative team in China, where the virus originated, was not yet back. And the number of coronavirus cases recorded worldwide topped 18 million on Monday, with the illness continuing its march. Take a look. 6 months after the World Health Organization declared a global emergency, the virus has killed more than 687,000 people since it first emerged in China late last year. That is according to an AFP tally compiled from official sources. Almost 11 million have recovered, and while nearly 690,000 have died. Fresh clusters have been reported in countries that had previously brought their outbreaks under control, forcing governments to reimpose lockdown measures despite worries over further economic fallout. And Queensland on edge since 2 women tested positive for COVID-19. Joining us live from Queensland, Australia, is our EBC correspondent, Morgan Goodfellow. Hello, Morgan. Good evening from Manila.
Good evening, Alma.
Go ahead, Morgan.
We bring you the latest updates on the COVID-19 situation in Australia. As of 9 p.m. this evening, 3rd of August 2020, the total confirmed cases are 18,318. with an increase of 444 within the last 24 hours, a total of 221 deaths and 10,618 recovered. At the moment, the state of Victoria has 11,937 confirmed cases, 429 within the last 24 hours, followed by New South Wales with 3,797 confirmed cases, 13 new cases within the past 24 hours, and Queensland with 1,085 confirmed cases, 0 within the past 24 hours. These numbers are from health.gov.au. Here in Queensland, Alma, 2 Queensland women who tested positive to COVID-19 after partying in Melbourne went to extraordinary lengths to conceal their activities and re-enter their home state, police alleged. Olivia Moronga and Diana Lassou, the two teenagers, have triggered a health emergency in southeast Queensland by returning from Melbourne and visiting schools, restaurants and a medical centre. Investigators plan to put both women before the Queensland courts once they have recovered from the virus. They continue to be treated in a secure ward in Brisbane's Princess Alexandra Hospital. On a lighter note, a giraffe at Australia's Zoo Beerwah sets a Guinness World Record as world's tallest. The 5.7-metre giraffe by the name of Forrest has now been officially named by the Guinness World Records as the world's tallest living giraffe. The Guinness World Records said in a press statement, giraffes typically measure 4.6 metres to 5.5 metres. The 12-year-old giraffe is also still growing. That's all for Australia. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you for the good news. But then I would like to ask Morgan, Melbourne had a spike in cases, and there has been some restrictions there following the coronavirus outbreak. Can you give us an update, though? I think Victoria declared a state of emergency as well. Can you give us an update on what's happening in Melbourne?
Yes, Alma. I have updates for the situation in Victoria. Restrictions are changing to slow the spread of coronavirus in Victoria. Stage 4 restrictions have been in place since 6 p.m. Sunday, 2nd of August for metropolitan Melbourne. This includes a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. every evening. During this time, people are only allowed to leave their house for work and essential health care and safety reasons. This information was also provided by health.gov.au. That's all the updates I have for Victoria. Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Morgan. How far are you from Victoria?
About 24 hours. I'm in Queensland, so...
If you drive, going there?
Yeah, about 24 hours, I'd say. I've never been there, so...
Quite far, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do take care, Morgan, and we hope to hear from you again. More updates from Australia. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time.
From Townsville, Australia, Morgan Goodfellow, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, as an update, the Australian state of Victoria, as Morgan had said, has declared a state of disaster. Now, Australia's Victoria State imposed a fresh sweeping restriction Sunday, including a curfew in Melbourne for the next 6 weeks, a ban on wedding gatherings in the city, and an order that schools and universities go back online in the coming days. Despite a lockdown, Melbourne has continued to report hundreds of new cases daily, even as other states in Australia have reported zero or a small number. Many other parts of the world are already struggling with much bigger outbreaks. Now, the nighttime curfew is being implemented across Melbourne from 8 to 5, and the only valid reasons for leaving home during these hours will be work, medical care, or caregiving. Now, Melbourne residents will only be allowed to shop and exercise within 5 kilometers or 3 miles of their home. Exercise outside of the home will only be allowed for 1 hour at a time. Only one person per household is allowed to shop for essentials at a time. And Metro Manila and other high-risk areas will be under a modified enhanced community quarantine effective 15 days starting Tuesday, August 4. Apart from Metro Manila, Laguna, Rizal, Cavite, and Bulacan will be under the quarantine classification based on the recommendation by Health Secretary Francisco Duque and approved by President Duterte on Sunday night. The President made the decision a day after a group of medical workers called on the government to impose a 2-week lockdown in Mega Manila again to allow them to recover from exhaustion. Let's listen in.
I have heard the call of different groups from the medical community for a 2-week enhanced community quarantine, SEQ, in Mega Manila. I fully understand why your health workers would like to ask for such a timeout period. They have been in the front lines for months and are exhausted. To our health workers, this is a war that you have been trained to fight. This is a profession that you, all of you, and though we are educated and trained to face such challenges, you're frontliners in the battle because you are learned in this field. Kung bayaan natin tutulungan, kung walang tutulong rather, sa bansa at ang mga kababayan natin, sino ang maasahan ko? Sino ang masahan natin na gumawa ng trabahong ito? Huwag kayong mawalaan ng pag-asa. Nakikita at kausap ko ang iba sa inyo. Habaan ninyo lang. You stretch your patience and your not endurance, because you can only also take so much. Your fervor. To my fellow countrymen, we are doing everything possible to alleviate the situation, to assist our healthcare workers and enhance and upgrade our healthcare system.
At least 80 medical associations representing thousands of doctors signed a letter asking the government to revert Manila to enhanced community quarantine or ECQ. The medical workers also noted the period could be used by the government to reassess its strategies against COVID-19 amid the rising cases. The president said he understood the call of medical workers and emphasized their work was greatly appreciated. He also said the government was ready to consider a stipend for the health workers. He also called on Congress to include free transportation, free accommodation, and free COVID-19 testing for the medical workers in the proposed Bayanihan Law 2. The government has blamed poor compliance with virus restrictions for the sharp increase in infections, which have been concentrated in Manila and the central city of Cebu. In a bid to curb rampant local transmission, police have been deployed to force people who have tested positive for the virus and cannot self-isolate at home into government-run quarantine facilities. Now, North-South ministers have discussed sharing passenger locator data, and Irish schools will reopen at the end of August. Bringing us that update is Rowana Bianca Arino from our EBC Ireland Bureau.
A plan to ensure that information and passenger locator forms for those flying into Ireland are shared more effectively between North and South was discussed at the North-South Ministerial Council meeting on Friday. According to Irish Times, at the meeting attended by First Minister Arlene Foster, Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill, and Taoiseach Micheál Martin, and Government Ministers, Ms. O'Neill said people needed to hold their hands up and say there has been a confused picture in terms of travel regulations of the North and South. She mentioned that it is confusing for citizens so far as we have two jurisdictions on the island with two different approaches, so they felt the need to address the abnormalities as quickly as possible. She said that a meeting of the British-Irish Council had been called in order to discuss different travel arrangements advised in the UK and Ireland. Mr. Martin defended Ireland's position on international travel and said the government had taken a cautious approach. The meeting was also given an update on the most recent COVID-19 figures by the Acting Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ronan Glenn. Mr. Martin also said it was not yet clear if the spike in cases reported in the state on Thursday was a pattern of a series of isolation clusters. Mr. Martin said COVID-19 was a vicious virus and it spreads like wildfire in certain settings. He said the most significant issue was the effectiveness of the testing and contact tracing system. That can never be lost sight of as we learn to live with COVID-19, he said. Mr. Martin cautioned against reading too much into the recent increase in COVID-19 cases in the state ahead of a cabinet meeting next week, during which the government will decide whether it can proceed with the next phase of reopening. On Brexit, Mr. Martin said there had been progress. Meanwhile, as the nation navigates its way out of coronavirus lockdown, Ireland's schools are set to reopen at the end of August, Prime Minister Micheál Martin said Monday. Ireland's blueprint for reopening schools for the first time since mid-March includes €370 million in spending to ensure safety. The package will also allow schools to hire 1,000 more post-primary teachers to reduce class sizes and enable social distancing, the government said. The new money will also cover the cost of protective equipment and cleaning supplies and make special provisions for those deemed vulnerable to COVID-19. Psychologists and other forms of emotional support will also be mobilized. Major emergencies always lead to a much higher level of anxiety and other similar issues. We fully understand the officials declared that the schools are open to carry on as if nothing happened, Martin told reporters. Irish schools were shut on March 12, 2 weeks before the nation entered a full lockdown. Ireland's officials suffered 1,764 deaths from the virus, with a single-day peak of 77 in April. In recent weeks, there have been many days with no deaths. However, earlier this month, the government delayed its plan to end lockdown because of the surge in the number of cases and the rise in infection rates. I'm Rowana Biancarino, correspondent in the Republic of Ireland, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Rowana. Now to Spain, where the labor minister has said that the government would extend its furlough scheme for an extra 3 months for those hit with the coronavirus pandemic. Joining us live from Spain is Beverly Madrid. Beverly.
Hi, Alma. Good evening.
Good evening from
Yes,
Manila.
yes.
Go ahead.
Here's my update. Spain could extend furlough scheme to year's end. Spain's Labor Minister Yolanda Diaz on Saturday suggested the government would extend its coronavirus furlough scheme for an extra 3 months until the end of the year. Speaking after talks in Majorca with the regional government and union bosses, Diaz said it would make no sense to drop the ERTE furlough scheme when it is scheduled to finish at the end of September. It would not make any sense to drop a protection system as important as the one designed by the government, she said of a scheme which has benefited millions of people. There is no point in designing a mechanism that involves huge amounts of public resources, then at the decisive moment we drop it, she said in comments broadcast on Spain's RNE radio. The key is in the last quarter of the year, Diaz said, indicating she wanted to send a message of calm. We are not going to remove anything. Her remarks came a day after Spain formally went into recession after its GDP fell by 18.5% in the second quarter. A total of 3.7 million people benefited from the government's furlough scheme between mid-March and the end of May. Labor Ministry figures shows. The government also banned layoffs in the 6 months after the end of the furlough scheme, although cutbacks are expected. A commitment to fund such temporary unemployment schemes was one of the key measures put in place by Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's government to bolster an economy battered by months of lockdown. The pandemic also destroyed more than 1 million jobs in Spain between April and June, mostly in the services and tourism sector. Spain's unemployment rate, which jumped to 15.3% by the end of June, could rise as high as 19% by the end year. The government has warned, while the IMF sees it rising to 20.8%. Hard hit by the virus, which has killed more than 28,400 people, Spain has been struggling with a spike in new infections that has sparked European travel warnings and a British quarantine move that has damaged the fledgling recovery of tourism. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Beverly, for your updates there in Spain. Looking forward for more reports from our EBC Spain Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma, for having me. Reporting from Barcelona, Spain, I am Beverly Madrid. We live in interesting times.
Thanks, Bev. Now, America's first crewed spaceship to fly to the International Space Station in nearly a decade returned safely to Earth on Sunday, splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look.
To see the Gulf of
Now, the
Mexico
mission
here
carried
in the
out
shot just
jointly by
momentarily.
NASA and the private company
now just about 20 meters
SpaceX
off
demonstrated that the U.S. has the capacity once more to send its astronauts to space and bring them back. The SpaceX Crew Dragon Endeavour splashed into the water of Pensacola, Florida at 2:48 p.m. local time, trailed by its 4 main parachutes. Now, it was the first water landing for a crewed U.S. spaceship since the 1975 Apollo-Soyuz mission. A flotilla of civilian boats swarmed the landing zone as a recovery ship also sped to the scorched capsule and hoisted it aboard with its crane. Now, the Coast Guard said it had warned people to stay away from the capsule, but numerous boaters ignored the requests. The hatch opening was delayed as a team worked to stop a potentially dangerous leak of rocket fuel vapor. Now, around an hour after the splashdown, the astronauts exited the capsule and then headed for shore on a helicopter. They were reunited with their families in Houston, where they walked off a plane in apparently good physical shape and upbeat spirits at a military base. And at the military base, they addressed the socially distanced welcome ceremony in a hangar. Let's listen in.
You know, the flight of Dragon on Falcon and then the reentry today, it's a lot to process. As I said 5 hours ago, we were in a spaceship bobbing around, making prank satellite phone calls to whoever we could get a hold of, which was kind of fun, by the way.
Today, when we got the wake-up calls from our boys, telling us a little bit about what they were looking forward to, which was us coming home, and in Theo's case, getting a new dog. It was a wonderful morning, and we very much appreciated it. And so, again, I think this kind of comes full circle. Took years to get here. We brought the capability back to America, and we came home safely to our families. And it took a lot of people a lot of time to make that happen.
Not really laying on their backs in the ocean. They are seated
Now, the
upright a
two
little
spent
bit, which would
63
allow
days
them
in
to have a
space.
better
The
view.
mission marks the first time the private company has launched people into orbit. And it's also the first time NASA astronauts had lifted off from the U.S. in nearly a decade. President Trump, who had traveled to Florida for the capsule's launch 2 months ago, hailed its safe return. Thank you to all, he tweeted. Great to have NASA astronauts return to Earth after very successful 2-month mission. The United States has had to rely on Russia for rides to space since the last space shuttle flew in 2011, and the mission is also a huge win for Elon Musk's SpaceX, which was founded in only 2002, but has leapfrogged its way past Boeing, its main competitor in the commercial space race. The U.S. has paid the two companies a total of about $7 billion for their space taxi contracts, though aerospace giant Boeing's efforts have floundered. In California, a growing wildfire has prompted more than 7,000 evacuations in Riverside County and east of Los Angeles. Take a look. The Apple Fire, which broke out Friday near the city of San Bernardino, has so far burnt more than 20,000 hectares. By early Monday, about 2,260 firefighters, backed by helicopters, water dumping planes, and trucks, were working to put out the fire. Crews managed to contain 5% of the fire by Monday after losing control of the blaze during Sunday afternoon. There were no reports of casualties, and the only damage so far has been to 2 buildings and 1 home. The edges of the fire are burning on rugged hills, hard for crews to reach, according to authorities. Now, dense vegetation fueled the blaze near homes, according to Fernando Herrera, the fire chief in Riverside County, while hot and dry conditions Monday will help the flames keep alive. Officials said the fire may have been set deliberately, and a probe is underway. And Tropical Storm Isaias threatened to bring strong winds, flash flooding, and life-threatening storm surges to North and South Carolina. As it roared up the east coast of the United States on Monday, the storm was packing maximum sustained winds of nearly 70 miles per hour and was expected to reach near hurricane strength when it made landfall in the virus-hit Carolinas later in the day, according to the National Hurricane Center in its latest public advisory at 0600 GMT. Let's listen in.
Just because it's now categorized as a tropical storm doesn't change its potential threat. The storm continued its march toward North Carolina overnight. State emergency managers here, along with our local partners, are preparing for the heavy winds and rain that this storm may bring. And we're asking North Carolinians in the storm's path to make sure they are prepared. I've declared a state of emergency, and we have received a federal emergency declaration for 25 counties so far. We in North Carolina mostly know what to do. You pack your emergency kit, follow local evacuation orders, stay in a safe place, and never drive through flooded roadways. But this time, pack your masks and hand sanitizer in your kit and remember to social distance. The 3 W's, wash, wear, and wait, are just as important during a storm as they ever were.
Now, the National Hurricane Center warned on Twitter that Isaias could bring a storm surge of up to 4 feet to coastal parts of South and North Carolina. And both states have seen a recent surge in coronavirus cases, with South Carolina announcing 1,100 new infections on Sunday and North Carolina just over 1,340. Up to 150 National Guard soldiers have been activated to help prepare for the storm and assist in the aftermath if necessary, according to Governor Cooper. Isaias, downgraded from a Category 1 hurricane, had earlier threatened Florida, where some coronavirus testing centers, many housed in tents, were closed last week as the storm approached. They will reopen on Wednesday, according to local government COVID-19 website. In other news, at least 15 children and a woman were killed and dozens of houses destroyed as flash floods lashed a village in eastern Afghanistan. Take a look.
ایو کړه و زه خپل نه تنه کې 15 رانه په حق ورسېدل او سرو زخمیان دي دوست تامه کې پراته دي او زه د کړه خو بیا مخیو او دا مې ورو کو د مشر دې کې یو مې وراندار د مشره او شپږ واړه بچیان دي
زمونږ د سیمه چې ټیم راغلی دی او دلته لومړنۍ ارزیابي وکړه هغه کورنۍ چې ډیر زیات بد حالت کې دي یعنی په ډاک ناز دي هغې لپاره موږ تصمیم لرو چې په عاجله توګه باندې سرپناه راوړو ورته ودرو او کوم امکانات چې
To other news now, Microsoft announced it would continue talks to acquire the U.S. operations of popular video sharing app TikTok after meeting with President Trump, who seemingly backed off his earlier threats to ban the Chinese-owned platform. Take a look. Following a conversation between Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and President Trump, Microsoft is prepared to continue discussions to explore a purchase of TikTok in the U.S., according to the company in a statement acknowledging the importance of addressing the president's concerns over national security. Microsoft added that it would continue negotiations with ByteDance, TikTok's Chinese parent company, with the intention of completing these discussions no later than September 15. The statement came after President Trump on Friday said he would ban the app, which is especially popular with young audiences who create and watch its short-form videos and has an estimated 1 billion users worldwide. Now, TikTok should be sold or blocked in the U.S., according to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin earlier, while Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said on Fox News the president would take action in the coming days with respect to a broad array of national security risks that are presented by the software connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, TikTok denies it could be a tool for Chinese intelligence. Let's listen in.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok. We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options, but a lot of things are happening. So we'll see what happens. But we are looking at a lot of alternatives with respect to TikTok.
What I will confirm is because TikTok acquired a U.S. company, it was subject to CFIUS jurisdiction. The CFIUS committee unanimously made a recommendation. That's one alternative which could force a sale. The president, as I said, can also use IEPA, as he's discussed. And there is enormous bipartisan support. We are not keeping TikTok in its current form, where the app can send back information and location on 100 million Americans.
I want to say thank you to the millions of Americans who use TikTok every day, bringing their creativity and joy into our daily lives. We've heard your outpouring of support and we want to say thank you. We're not planning on going anywhere. TikTok is a home for creators and artists to express themselves, their ideas, and connect with people across different backgrounds.
Eagle News will be right back.
Noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
The United States notched 47,508 new coronavirus cases in 24 hours on Sunday, according to a tally by Johns Hopkins University. Now, there were also 515 new deaths, according to the Baltimore-based University real-time count at 8:30 p.m. local time. Sunday's toll was a slight dip, as the previous 5 days had all recorded more than 60,000 new infections. The U.S. has now tallied 4,665,002 cases and 154,834 deaths, making it by far the hardest hit country in the world. The new numbers came as Florida battened down for Tropical Storm Isaias, even as it battles a coronavirus outbreak which complicated preparations. Florida has the second highest caseload of all states except California, which has doubled the population. And our Hawaii correspondent, Alfred Asenas, has the latest on the COVID-19 outbreak in the Aloha State, which is also preparing for the primary election this coming weekend. Take a look.
As of Sunday, August 2, the total number of COVID-19 cases in Hawaii is now at 2,242, of which almost 1,900 are on this island of Oahu alone. Total number of new cases today stands at 45, which compared to yesterday was 87. Now, this may look like a positive sign, whether the curve may start to flatten, especially when the state received triple-digit new cases late last week. However, Lieutenant Governor and Dr. Josh Green pointed out that today's case count does not include results from one of the private labs due to a reporting delay. Meanwhile, Dr. Sarah Park of the state's Department of Health also pointed out on Twitter, and I quote, "We are missing electronic laboratory reporting, or ELR, data from one of the private clinical laboratories from July 31 to today. This is likely a result of recent modifications in data reporting required by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services." So there are already some speculations with today's and even yesterday's numbers might be triggered by some delay in reporting, which may impact the true number of cases statewide. Now, the main focus for Hawaii this week is the upcoming primary election scheduled for Saturday, August 8th. Given the ongoing concerns brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic here in the Aloha State, the state of Hawaii will conduct this year's primary as well as general elections mostly by mail. There will be no traditional polling precincts, just like in previous years. Now, residents who are already registered should have already gotten an envelope like this that contains a ballot itself, some instructions, and as well as an envelope self-addressed and stamped that can be dropped off in drop boxes that look like this one in the background. What could be considered as the main event for this year's election is the office of Mayor of Honolulu. By law, Mayor Kirk Caldwell will not be allowed to run for a third term. Now, the way the election for mayor works here on Oahu is because the position is nonpartisan. What happens on Saturday during the primary election is that whoever gets an outright majority of the votes will win the office of mayor. Now, if none of them reach a majority, then the top two will compete in a runoff in the general election currently scheduled for November 3. We have at least a dozen candidates vying for the top job here on the island. There are familiar names like former Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa and former Honolulu Mayor Mufi Hanneman, who served as such in the 2000s, and both of them also ran for governor. But there are also other names like Kim Pine, who is a member of the Honolulu City Council, and some other names like Keith Amemiya and former general manager of Hawaii News Now, Rick Blangiardi. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Alfred Asenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization praised Vietnam's quick response to the new surge in cases there, plus many more updates from our EBC correspondent there, Ralph Wandolf. Empire, Ralph.
A special flight from Germany has brought 226 diplomats and business people from 15 European countries, and all were quarantined on arrival. The Bamboo Airways flight took off from Frankfurt and landed at Noi Bai International Airport on Hanoi on Thursday night. A press release from the delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Vietnam, one of the organizers of the trip, said. Marco Walde, chief representative of the delegation, said that this will promote investment and business activities as well as contribute to the successful achievement of the dual objectives, promoting socioeconomic development and effectively preventing the epidemic in Vietnam. Furthermore, this flight will be a special mark in the EU-Vietnam relationship as well as German-Vietnamese cooperation. A perfect start when the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, or EVFTA, will come into effect on August 1, 2020, Marco added. The EVFTA reduces or eliminates tariffs of 99%. Vietnam halted international commercial flights and entry for foreign nationals in late March and has since only allowed people with diplomatic or official passports, experts, and high-skilled workers to enter. The country of 96 million has been struggling with a new wave of domestic infections. In other news, the World Health Organization has hailed Vietnam for its quick response to the latest COVID-19 outbreak and bringing back its stranded citizens from abroad. Hee Dong Park, the WHO representative in Vietnam, referring to the recent COVID-19 cases caused by local transmission in Da Nang and the nearby province of Quang Hai, said in a statement, and I quote, "We will not be surprised if Vietnam reports more COVID-19 cases in the community in the upcoming time." It shows that the disease surveillance system has been working effectively, allowing it to find cases quickly and in time. We believe Vietnam will be able to quickly detect infection cases, track down infected ones, and locate distributed areas to put down the outbreaks. Unquote. He was speaking at a meeting with the National Steering Committee on COVID-19 Prevention and Control in Hanoi on Monday, Vietnam News Agency reported. WHO respects Vietnam's decision to bring home hundreds more from stricken areas, including 219 from Equatorial Guinea, of whom more than half are infected, and 226 from Uzbekistan, of whom around 100 are infected. On Tuesday morning, a flight left for Equatorial Guinea from Hanoi along with the medical team. Those in Uzbekistan are expected to be brought back early next month. Since April, Vietnam has operated more than 60 flights to bring home more than 16,000 nationals from over 50 countries and territories, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said. With dozens of new infections expected to be found in Da Nang, the steering committee has called on the Ministry of Health to have its personnel at hospitals and clinics in localities near the city to stand by to assist. This is Ralph Wandel Empire bringing you the latest updates here in Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
To India now, where Interior Minister Amit Shah and two other chiefs of two big states, Karnataka and the Madhya Pradesh, they've been hospitalized with COVID-19, and the country's daily cases topped 50,000 for a fifth straight day. Take a look. Now, the country reported 52,972 new confirmed infections in the past 24 hours, taking the total to 1.8 million, the third highest in the world after the U.S. and Brazil. With 771 new deaths, the COVID-19 disease has now killed 38,135 people in India, including that of a minister on Sunday in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And a BBC Persian service investigation has found that the number of deaths from the coronavirus disease in Iran is nearly triple what Iran's government claims. Now, the government's own records appear to show almost 42,000 people died with symptoms, COVID-19 symptoms, up to the July 20th, versus 14,405 reported by its health ministry. The number of people known to be infected is also almost double the official figures, 451,024 as opposed to 278,827. Iran on Sunday reported its highest single-day coronavirus infection count in nearly a month, warning that most of its provinces have been hit by a resurgence of the disease. The Islamic Republic has been battling the Middle East's deadliest outbreak of COVID-19 since late February. HSBC reported a 69% slump in net profit, joining a number of major banks whose earnings have been slammed by the coronavirus fallout. Take a look. Meanwhile, Asian and European markets mostly fell Monday, with sentiment depressed by a spike in virus infections that has forced fresh lockdowns and sparked worries about the impact on the world economy. Japan's Nikkei 225 rose more than 2% as investors picked up cheap stocks following a steep drop last week, while there was also some cheer in data showing that the country's economy contracted less than first thought in January to March. Shanghai put on 1.8% following a forecast, beating reading on factory activity from Caixin days after a strong official report showed improvement in the manufacturing sector. Now, Seoul edged up slightly. However, Hong Kong dropped 0.6% as the city continues to see more than 100 infections a day, forcing authorities to put ever tighter measures in place. Singapore, Mumbai, and Taipei were each off more than 1%. Manila tanked more than 3% after the government said it would shut down the capital and nearby provinces for 15 days after a surge in cases, while Jakarta was off almost 3%. There were also losses in Sydney, Bangkok, and also in Wellington. London, Paris, and Frankfurt were all in the red in early trade. Now, virus concerns and a weak dollar caused by a massive program of U.S. monetary easing helped safe haven gold to a new record Monday, topping out at $1,988.40 US before easing back slightly. From biblical plague to modern-day protein, one Israeli firm wants to make locusts a sustainable food choice in the Holy Land and beyond. As for whether or not the insects are kosher, the answer is not so simple. At Hargo Food Tech's farm in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, a rectangular enclosure that once served as a chicken co-op is filled with thousands of locusts, grasshopper species that have a highly destructive swarming phase. Take a look.
Grasshoppers probably provide the best nutritional content than any other creature in the world. The animal, as it is, with no processing, contains 70% protein, over 70% protein, all essential amino acids. They are also very high on omega-3, omega-6, iron, zinc, and folic acid, so they are really healthy for you. What they do lack is saturated fat and cholesterol. They have the good stuff, they don't have the bad stuff.
In tennis, world number 7 Alexander Zverev said he is still unsure about playing in the U.S. Open. Take a look. Boston Celtics guard Marcus Smart was issued the first fine of the restart of the NBA season on Saturday after criticizing referees in a loss Friday to Milwaukee. Take a look. The NBA fined Smart $15,000 for his comments to reporters after the Celtics fell to the Bucks 119-112 in their opening games inside the league's quarantine bubble campus at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Smart was upset after a charging call against reigning NBA most valuable player Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Bucks. What would have been the Greek star's sixth foul to force him out of the game was overturned into a blocking foul against him. The controversial call came with 88 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter and the game tied at 107-107. The Bucks own the best record in the NBA at 54-12 and lead the Eastern Conference by 7 games over Toronto, with Boston third on 43-22. And Tokyo 2020 organizers unveiled a new schedule for the coronavirus postponed Paralympics next year, with only minor modifications to the original calendar for the event. Take a look. The historic decision to delay the 2020 Games over the pandemic means the Paralympics are now scheduled to run from August 24 to September 5, 2021. The program will feature 539 events across 22 sports, with modifications made only to start and finish times for some events, Tokyo 2020 said at a press conference. Tokyo 2020 Olympics delivery officer Hidemusa Nakamura told reporters, having the schedule fixed is a big step for athletes, and we would like to continue our work to create a safe and secure games. The postponement of the games has created a massive headache for organizers as they navigate everything from securing venues to devising coronavirus countermeasures. So far, specific measures to prevent infection have not been announced With decisions expected sometime this autumn for the Paralympics in particular, officials said they are mindful that they must cater to the needs of individual athletes and spectators with a range of different health and physical requirements. Tokyo organizers said they are also working with the International Paralympic Committee to assess how the viral pandemic has affected athletes in various countries.
練習やプレッシャーは相当にきつい。正直逃げ出したいこともある。でもそれがなくなって初めて、ああやっぱり自分も。
And before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night, Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng patnubay at gabay ng magulang para sa mga batang manonood.
Lahat po tayo ay taos-pusong nagpapasalamat ng marami sa mga tao po na ginagawan tayo ng mabuti at nagmamalasakit po sa atin sa panahong ito ng pandemic.
Pero sino po kaya ang higit nating dapat pasalamatan sa panahong ito? At ano-ano po ang mga dahilan kung bakit dapat tayong magpasalamat sa kanya? Ako po, ang kapatid na Ron Aranzaso.
At ako naman po ang kapatid na Lemuel Solano. Muli po, samahan ninyo kami dito sa programang Pasugo.